Doctor Who is back once again with an Earth-based Ruby-focused political thriller, but did it hit the mark, or will this go down as nothing more than skippable filler? Spoilers ahead. Lucky Day, written by Pete McTighe, I think that's how you say it, starts boldly in the same alleyway as The Empty Child. In other words, they still film in Cardiff. Mind you, this was set in London, as was The Empty Child, so it could just be the same alleyway. I mean, who cares? Anywho, the episode kicks off in 2007 with the Doctor and Belinda using the Vindicator once again to try and land closer to Belinda's time. While doing this, they get seen by an 8-year-old boy named Conrad, who, much like Amy Pond, is fascinated by the Doctor and the TARDIS. But we'll get into that comparison properly later on. He tells his mum, and she gives him a hearty New Year's punch on the head for lying. I mean, we've all been there. The very next time we see Conrad, he's explaining as an adult how he met the Doctor, and on his podcast he finally has a guest who's travelled with and met said Doctor too, Ruby Sunday. Roll opening credits. Instantly, I'm a happy boy. This was a fun setup, and seeing Ruby again, which we all knew was coming, was nice. I already knew this, as many fans did, but this is a Doctor-light episode, and that becomes evident very early on. This episode, like every other episode in the season, has been a direct mirror of the equivalent one in the previous season, meaning that this week is a standalone political thriller set on contemporary Earth starring only Ruby with involvement from UNIT, a pub full of local arseholes, and is set up for a political figure who will make a cameo appearance in the finale. Trust me, Conrad is definitely coming back in the finale. Anyway, this episode follows Ruby and Conrad as they slowly start to develop a liking for each other. Conrad has that podcast inspired by his encounter with the Doctor, and he wants to get to know more through Ruby, ends up falling for her, and the pair go on a few dates. However, before this, an entire year before, in fact, Conrad sees the Doctor and Ruby mid-adventure, set just after the Devil's Cord from Season 1, as they battle the Shriek, a very Monster of the Week style monster. Conrad gets vommed on and escapes, but not before taking a slightly creepy picture of Ruby like that one guy on Twitter called Doctor Who Filming Locations. Yes, you're a weirdo. During one of the dates between Ruby and Conrad, Ruby gives him a little vial of antidote to avoid the Shriek from hunting him, but he stupidly didn't take it because he wanted to be brave like the Doctor. Now the pub is overrun with Shriek, the lights are flickering, UNIT are on the phones, Kate Stewart's not a lesbian. It's all going pear-shaped. Ruby calls in UNIT, and the ultra-militarised entrance of theirs tells me everything I need to know about the future of UNIT in Doctor Who, and that is that their days are numbered. Anyway, it's here where Conrad reveals himself as a mega incel whose life goal, along with his team of losers, is to publicly disgrace UNIT and call out the supposed lies of UNIT, the government, and the Doctor. This mid-episode twist is fantastic, and dealt with so well. It's chilling. I mean, I saw it coming a mile off, but the moment of realisation, the taunting from the think tank group, Kate Stewart's face, it was all phenomenally handled. The rest of the episode becomes a bit of a war between the UNIT gang and Conrad, and I suppose his lackeys, featuring news reports and interviews with Conrad, all siding with him. It was looking bad for UNIT. All the staff names had been leaked, funding was going to be cut, it was awful. Anyway, after some planning, failing and panic, the episode culminates in the UNIT tower with Conrad all-school shootery live-streaming his attempt at disgracing the team of Earth defenders. It's actually pretty scary. Not in the hide behind your sofa sense, but just like it felt real. Like Conrad really felt like someone we all know, if that makes sense. It's unnerving. Anyway, as we all will then have seen, Kate Stewart does the difficult task of basically sentencing Conrad to death by opening up the cage with the real Shriek in it and letting it loose on Conrad, who had previously been marked as prey. Of course, he then starts panicking and believing it's real finally, until Ruby saves him and he finds an opportunity to save face for even a second and tries once again to belittle what UNIT do. But it's okay, his arm nearly gets bitten off. We finally then see the Doctor materialise the TARDIS around Conrad in prison before delivering one of the coldest speeches the Doctor has ever performed in Ncuti Gatwa's shining moment as the character. The episode ends with Mrs. Flood calling herself a governor and freeing Conrad. So that's what happened. I wanted to go through all that very quickly just to sort of remind us all of the events, because my thoughts on this episode are far more focused on the themes and interpretations of what went on as a whole, more so than the actual moment-to-moment drama. I also don't really have a list of things I liked and didn't like. A spoiler alert for the end of this video, there was nothing I disliked about Lucky Day, so have a guess what my score out of 10 is going to be. So first and foremost, I want to get the Mrs. Flood thing out the way because I actually really liked her showing up this time. She finally did something. I've been saying for a while she needs to do something bad to keep the interest, more than just looking at the camera or showing up in places. Freeing Conrad and calling herself a governor is exactly what I wanted. But why does the governor thing stand out to me? Well, earlier in the episode, when things were going pear-shaped for UNIT, Kate made a throwaway comment about UNIT's tech falling into the hands of a dictator, potentially ripping the planet apart. Well, as we know, the planet does in fact seem to be ripped apart later in May 2025, which is, where we are now, so it's not looking good. Mrs. Flood calling herself some kind of authority figure and then freeing a man who could help her get UNIT's tech? Yeah, I think that whole thing might end up being a little bit more important than we're expecting. Oh, also, Conrad is obviously definitely going to show up again. He mentioned rejecting the Doctor's reality before, Between that and the finale being called Wishworld and the Reality War, I'm 90% sure Conrad is going to be the leader of some alternate version of Earth perpetuated by Mrs. Flood. One more thing on her before I move on. It would be really cool if she's just a Time Lord called the Governor, and that this was her outright telling the truth and we won't realise till later. That would be a fun reveal. It's not super likely, but we'll see. Regarding her identity, I am just going to mention the leaks for a moment, but don't worry, I won't actually say the content of them beyond this episode. So if you do want to avoid the leaks, you're safe watching this. Basically, the leaks now are just wrong. The guy who leaked the stuff originally got it pretty bang on with the robot revolution, because all of that was already public information. He got the Lux stuff partially right, but completely misread the context of whatever leak he had, and that's the same with the well. According to him, the entity manipulated people with sign language, which just didn't happen, and the fans from Lux were negatively critiquing the Doctor and Belinda while they were animated. Again, that's not how it went down. It's worth noting that references to these things were in the Doctor Who magazines and comics. Based on the information in them, the incorrect assumptions made by the leaker do actually seem kind of reasonable and understandable. What I'm saying is, I think this guy had a few tidbits from episodes 1 to 3 and just made the rest up. My reason for saying this is he got episode 4 totally wrong. He did say that Conrad was not all that he seemed, but to be fair, obviously he wasn't. Anyone could have seen that coming, and we already knew that from filming way back in 2023. He did, however, also go on to say that Conrad is an alien who had been mind-controlling Ruby. That didn't happen, did it? If you know the leaks, you know there's one specific thing in the next episode to look out for. If that comes true, we'll know there is some truth behind all the rest of the leaks. But if that's not true, that more or less confirms that he only had info on the first few episodes and he's just made the rest up. The reason I'm so sure the latter half of the leaks are false is because what they suggest happens regarding Mrs. Flood just doesn't make any sense at all at the moment. I just can't really see it coming true. Anyway, enough of that, this video is clearly going to be quite long. Yeah, so Ruby needs therapy, and I love that we sort of got a post-Doctor stress disorder storyline here. Of course, that PDSD is triggered more so by Conrad's actions, but she was also always going to be having these issues. In fact, the sign at the train station flickering and stressing her was almost definitely in her head and part of the stress, separate from Conrad. He couldn't have made that happen in the same way he did the lights in the pub. I really like that at the end she fully acknowledges it and accepts that she needs time away from the Doctor and the whole unit Earth defending situation. The break will only last a few weeks though, as I'm sure we're going to see her in Wishworld. Beyond the companion support group from a couple of years ago, we almost never see any direct mental health fallout from travelling with the Doctor. So tying that in with the manipulative boyfriend storyline was a really good move. Speaking of Ruby, once again she smashes it as the sole lead of an episode. I felt that as a character she had more depth this year than last, so it was a really welcome episode in my opinion. Although I do wish we got more time with Belinda, given that the seasons are only 8 episodes now, and Ruby did get the full 8 last year. Millie Gibson again puts out a wonderful performance, but she's not the only one. In fact, I think every actor in this episode was firing on all cylinders from the very first second. The Doctor's speech at the end, we'll get to it, but my god, it was so good. Conrad, brilliant performance all the way through, terrifying. But the real hero of this episode in terms of acting was Kate Stewart. What a legend. I love Kate, I think we all do, but this was one of the first times she really let loose, and I think this is one of her best episodes ever, if not the best. As a setup for the upcoming spin-off, I am happy with how it's going. I can see her finally getting a real strong character arc and storyline to go deep with, and I cannot wait. She was wonderful every second she was on screen. This review is very disjointed, so I'm sorry about that. I've got way too many thoughts and frankly not enough time at all. Well, not any time. I don't have the time to be making this video, so the fact that I am is a miracle. But this episode was so good that I just had to do it anyway. Anyway, the whole episode being about a group of rebels, in quote marks, using their platform to take down an organisation is a really interesting story for Doctor Who to tell. In a show that's always been very anti-establishment and anti-government in a lot of ways, it's fun to see the opposing take. What happens when the taking down of an organisation or government is done recklessly, without reason, or it's led by morons? It's a tricky point to make because the argument could be made that everything is subjective and everyone reserves the right to stand up against the establishments. But we as the audience know that UNIT aren't lying, so we're instinctively on their side, we know they're the goodies. But in so many other cases within the same show, we're on the side of the free thinkers who rally the public. It's a very fun topic to play with, and with the further militarization of UNIT, you can kind of see the show slightly hinting that even though Conrad was a piece of shit, UNIT do need to be taken down a notch, just a little bit. I really do think the spin-off is going to be interesting if it deals with maybe even Kate being struck off from UNIT or taken away or something. I don't know, I'm excited. There's a lot that can be read into here and so many real-life comparisons to be made. The episode doesn't shy away from saying that if you're a fucking idiot with a platform, you're as dangerous as anyone else. White man in his 20s spewing shit on a podcast for attention, power, and to enrage the general public? Yeah, this totally isn't targeted at the real world climate right now. I like it when Doctor Who gets real, and this episode was very real and grounded. I loved it. One big thing I noticed was that this episode actually showed a sort of alternate scenario that could have happened with Amy Pond back in Series 5. As a child, she met the Doctor, who promised to take her travelling, only to not come back until she was in her early 20s. In this time, she'd been in therapy and dealt with abandonment and attachment issues, a sense of wonder and a strong will to fight anyone who dared to doubt or disagree with her. Even after all of those years of disappointment, the girl who waited still wanted to save the world and be a hero. As a child, her friends believed her just enough to give her the hope that the Doctor was real after all. Conrad, on the other hand, well, he got a slap from his mum at the first mention of him. He didn't grow up to be a hero. He didn't wait around for the Doctor to return in hope. He got angry, he got bitter. No one believed him, so why should he have believed it himself? I know at the episode it was hinted at him having become a bit bitter after a failed application to UNIT 8 years ago, but based on Kate's initial reaction not to trust him, it's clear that he was already hateful. I really like this opposing set of events following a childhood encounter with the Doctor. Amy becomes a hero, Conrad becomes a villain. Both products of their experience and environment. Deep down, Conrad wanted to believe everything. Well, no, he did believe everything. He wanted everything to go well, but he was so deeply hurt and damaged from a young age that he couldn't help but to cause chaos and get the attention he craved and lacked from a young age, going as far as sneaking into a building with a gun ready to kill a tower full of people. Conrad became nothing short of a terrorist, and he won't be the only one. Man, Doctor Who is so primed for stories like this, and I'm glad we get this sort of thing now. Generally, I think the show is a bit darker than it has been recently. Where Ruby needed therapy following her adventures with the Doctor and the subsequent mental health struggles, Conrad needed therapy following his single encounter with the Doctor and subsequent rejection and accusations of lying throughout his life. The difference is, Ruby acknowledged that she needed to take action. Conrad didn't. Conrad let it fester. He pushed away his support network by buying his mum a house in another country, leaving him with nothing but his gang of self-engineered yes-men to bolster his anarchy. Ruby had a family who cared. Conrad had a team who didn't. I love this parallel. What a fucking episode, man. One other major thing about this episode that I want to bring up is the TARDIS encounter. He's just an incredible Doctor. The TARDIS materialising around you for the sole purpose of being berated by the Doctor is about as scary as it gets. And good lord, Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor is finally showing his dark side. This was a hell of a speech. I could tell he was angry, livid even. He was terrifying, even going as far as to give Conrad spoilers and tell him his future. The Doctor doesn't do that as a rule, basically. It was such a fun display of his raw power as well, being able to immediately see Conrad's future just by looking at him. While barely in the episode, the Doctor felt like such an enormous force, and I love that. He's finally feeling like an alien. He can be mean, scary, a bit of an arsehole, and he's something to be scared of. This episode showed that. I also love that Conrad was the guy to tell the Doctor about Belinda in the first place. It's quite cool knowing now that the Doctor went after her, in search of her, probably because he was worried that Conrad knew something or was planning something. It's an interesting turn of events, but a satisfying answer to the question nonetheless. Just to wrap up my thoughts for now, though I will be making a full analysis on everything in the episode after some rewatches in the future, because good lord there is a lot to love here. I just want to say how really well shot this episode was. Very, very pretty from start to finish, with some really fun, unnerving shots throughout, both in the TARDIS and during the uncomfortable reveal halfway through. I love the Shriek's design. Again, Doctor Who is proving that practical monsters with CGI enhancements is the way to go, and that was evidenced by a really good looking monster of the week this time. So with all that, knowing that this was barely even scratching the surface of my thoughts, but I simply just do not have the time this week to make a video any longer than it already is, which is, getting to 15 minutes now, I'm giving Lucky Day a 10 out of 10, and saying with confidence that this is my favourite episode of the season so far. I know this one isn't getting as much public praise as the last couple have, but man, this one just hits every single target for me. I loved it. I could see myself returning to this one very often and loving it every time. I prefer it to 73 yards, which is very much not what I thought would happen. Anyway, thanks for watching. What did you think of the episode? Let me know down below. I'll have a review for the story in the engine next week, probably earlier than Thursday, or well, I would hope so. But until then, thanks for watching, and as always, stay wibbly, stay wobbly, stay timey-wimey, and I'll see you in the next one.